people get anchored to a certain price. Say they've seen a 52-week high or an all-time high. Now they demand that price for selling their investment, even if the situation has changed.
Nimesh, is it true that once you make an investment, you have invested part of yourself in it? I read somewhere that the word investment literally means to clothe yourself, and that comes from the Latin. When you make an investment, you wrap it around yourself and becomes a part of you. You like to throw a light on that?
Sure. So this is an interesting topic to discuss. Richard Thaler, who's a Nobel Prize winner again for behavioral economics, he has written a book called Misbehaving, and in which he describes a situation where he's talking to his colleague in the university. This colleague of his is a wine collector. He loves to collect these nice wines, vintage wines. And over a period of time, those wine prices also go up. So he gets the benefit of appreciation also.
Right.
So let's say he bought a particular wine at, say, $10. Over a period of a few years, the prices of the wine go up and say they go to $100. Now, he enjoys these wines
Right.
A lot. But Thaler asked him that, would you pay today's price for this wine, for a $100 wine, for example?
Yeah.
So he would say, no. I enjoy these wines, but I won't pay $100 today. I'm happy that I bought them at $10. Now, in fact, he told that one of the wine vendors had approached this colleague and says, I'm ready to buy your collection at today's prices. Now, this guy did not sell. So now Richard Thaler got confused, said, this is illogical. How can you enjoy the wine and not sell them at the current price, which means the joy that you get from these wines is much more than the current price. But if you ask whether you will pay the current price to buy these wines, you say no. So at one price, you're neither ready to buy nor ready to sell. So they explored this concept further. Psychologists Richard Thaler, Daniel Kahneman, and Jack Nimesh. They did some experiment like this with the university kids also. They printed certain mugs with the university logo. They got a group of students together. Half of them, they gave these mugs for free, and other half obviously did not get the mugs. And they said, you can trade these mugs within yourself. No trades happened, surprisingly. So they inquired, why is that? How come nobody's ready to sell, nobody's ready to buy? They found that the average price the kids who did not have the mug were ready to pay was $2.75 approximately.
Okay.
The average price that a student who had the mug and would sell would be $5.75. So more than twice that amount. And they found this effect or this bias to be called a endowment bias. That when you hold something and you want to part with it, you value it more than what the price you would pay if you don't have it.
It's a very interesting perspective, Nimesh. But Nimesh, isn't it contrary to what we sometimes say? We undervalue what we have and overvalue what we don't have.
Oh, okay. So people who have a philosophical bent of mind, they would say that what we have, we take for granted and we undervalue it. But here the situation is slightly different. Here you are being asked to part with something you have. And then you are in investment also, you're constantly asked, how much price would you demand for losing this or for giving it up? So that's slightly different for undervaluing what your possessions are. Here, because you're constantly thinking about what price I would want to sell it at or what to part with it, what price would I want? And that makes the endowment effect very important.
Right. That makes sense. So you said the number of biases of number of trades reduces number of endowment bias?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm for it. So I always advocate that you should not churn your portfolio or trade too much. And a lot has been written about the negative impact of churn on your portfolio. However, the opposite side has never been explored so much. When the situation warrants a change and you don't change it, that is also harmful. So you don't trade much. But if the situation warrants that you either sell a particular security or change your portfolio positioning, and you don't do it, that is also wrong. Endowment bias creates the second or the latter impact. Typically, there are two, three sources of endowment effect. One is loss aversion, that people don't like to book losses, even when certain negative news comes in, and they are willing to accept low probability for holding on to these securities. So, loss aversion is an important source of having an endowment bias. The second is anchoring. People get anchored to a certain price. Say they've seen a 52-week high or an all-time high. Now they demand that price for selling their investment, even if the situation has changed. And one of the interesting impact of endowment bias has been studied in the IPO market. And this was studied by a few researchers for the Indian IPO market. As you would know, in India, if a IPO is oversubscribed by a big amount, uh, people are allotted certain minimum number of shares, but they are done on a random basis or a lottery basis. What these researchers found was that even if an investor has got a very small allocation in that particular IPO, they tend to hold on to it longer.
Right.
And the people who did not get allotted or lost the allotment in the IPO, they don't immediately go and buy, even like, if they like the company, because it lists at a higher price and they don't want to pay that price. Even in, say, 12 months or 24 months down the line of this company, there is a high propensity of winners of that lottery of IPO to continue to buy or hold that security versus the loser. So that is also, in a way, an endowment effect that comes in, that you love what you already possess.
Very interesting. So tell me, Nimesh, what are the other areas where this endowment bias impacts?
So Dan Ariely and Norton came out with impact or a version of endowment bias called the IKEA effect. As we know, IKEA is a furniture retailer, Swedish furniture retailer, who you buy their stuff and you assemble it at home yourself. So many of the people just pick up stuff from there, they deliver it to you, and you have to construct that whole table or chair or on your own. You make it on your own. Now that creates a certain emotional attachment to that furniture. It was realized in certain research that people value what they assembled on their own more than the already built furniture. Now, IKEA effect exists in investors also, and especially analysts, where if you have worked on a particular company closely and built models around it, and uh, you kind of tend to fall in love with your picks in a way, or be more attached to your recommendations. And that endowment effect makes it difficult to change recommendation even when it is warranted, or
Right.
change the position.
Right.
The second impact of endowment bias is like the wine example that we discussed. There is a certain hold zone. Now, hold zone is when you either have a buy or a sell recommendation, but there is a hold zone where you're not ready to buy at that price, but you don't want to sell because you believe somebody else will pay a higher price for it.
Right.
So that hold zone, in a way, is also possibly because of the endowment bias.
Right.
One of the other ways endowment bias impacts, suppose you are inheriting a portfolio. Now, scenario A, you have a portfolio where you're given 30 securities and you can rearrange that portfolio the way you want for better returns. Scenario 2 is you're given that equal amount of money as cash in the portfolio,
Okay.
and you design the portfolio yourself. Typically, people find the second scenario little easier than the first scenario to create a portfolio. In the second scenario, you select the securities that you like, you put them in the right allocation, and then create a portfolio accordingly. In the first scenario, when you're inheriting securities, you have to evaluate those securities. And then during that period, because you already possess those securities, endowment bias comes in. And it's difficult to change that portfolio completely in an unbiased fashion.
So then, how does one manage these biases?
So every now and then, it is important that when you're evaluating portfolios, think from a fresh perspective. Suppose somebody had just deleted your portfolio. Would you construct the portfolio in the same way again? Would you put the same securities in it? Would you put the same weightages in it? Would you, what kind of scenario would you sell them or so. So getting a fresh perspective on portfolios will give you, will recognize at least that there's some bias that has crept in and we need to de-bias or rebias from that. But that's a simple way of addressing the possession bias or this endowment bias that comes in.
And didn't you know there are so many biases which are so important when it comes to investment decisions?
Absolutely.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risk. Read all scheme related documents carefully.